For anyone who played Tekken 3 in the late 1990s, Eddy Gordo was the go-to character for button bashers and mashers to use. Just a fun character if you didn't know how to play the game. Those spinning capoeira kicks, that flowing rhythmic movement, that style that made him simultaneously the most exciting and the most frustrating character to play with your friends. But hidden behind those dancing kicks and that carefree Brazilian spirit is actually one of the most heartbreaking stories Tekken has ever dared to tell. A story of a son who watched his father die. This is a story of a person who went to prison for a crime he didn't commit, who spent 8 years in a cell learning to fight, and who sacrificed absolutely everything only to lose it anyway. This is, ladies and gentlemen, the story of Eddy Gordo, the button basher you love to hate. For anyone who's trying to understand Eddy Gordo and how far he fell from grace, you need to understand his Exodus story, which we're going to dive into right now. Eddy was actually born into the wealthiest family, the most respected families in Brazil. Now you got to understand the poverty in Brazil is night and day, especially in the favelas. He wasn't just rich, he was powerful, it was influential. You're talking about like a political system family here. And it's a family that played a very important role in the Brazilian society and the law. So Eddy grew up knowing that one day he would inherit everything that his family built. A future of privilege, purpose, and a promise stretched out to him. He came home one day and found his father shot, dying on the floor. In his final breaths, Eddy's father revealed the truth. He had been trying to destroy a dangerous Brazilian drug cartel known as the Organization. So he had been fighting them in secret, but they found him. And then his father asked his son to do something that would change the course of Eddy's entire life. He asked him to take responsibility for his death, to confess to a murder that he didn't commit. A son murdering his dad? Why? To go prison? So that the real killers wouldn't know that someone was out there who knew the truth? And Eddy Gordo, the 19-year-old boy, just watched his father die. Guess what he said? He said yes. He didn't even say, let me think about it for a moment. At 19 years old, his life flips upside down. He gave it all up for his father's request. For anyone who's ever felt trapped, Eddy Gordo's 8 years in prison will definitely hit differently. He went in as a wealthy teenager with everything. He came out as something else entirely. Inside those prison walls with nothing but time and grief and the burning need to survive, Eddy met an old man, a master in capoeira. The ancient Brazilian martial art that blends fighting with dance, music and culture. A martial art born from enslaved people who disguised their combat training as sheer dance, so their captors wouldn't recognize it for what it was, a phenomenal martial art. A martial art literally born from people who had their freedom taken away, guys. And inside a jail, a man who had his freedom taken away learned that martial art, mastered it. For 8 years, Eddy practiced. Every single day, through the grief, through the pain, through the injustice of knowing that he was innocent and he took the hit for his dad. He practiced capoeira till it became a part of him. And when Eddy broke out, he was ready to find the people who murdered his father. Ready to make them pay for what they did. Now, guys, for anyone who played Tekken 3, I remember playing it on the demo. You just had Eddy and Ling Xiaoyu. You would never think this is this guy's origin story. I never remembered it like this as a kid. And it's really so deep because Eddy's like entrance into the King of Iron Fist tournament made perfect sense once you knew the story. Like, it wasn't there for glory, it wasn't there for money. As a kid, I just thought he was just a fun character, but he was there because every path led to revenge through the Mishima Zaibatsu. The connection between the organization that killed his father and Kazuya Mishima's criminal empire was really clear. And Eddy was going to follow that path wherever it led. So through Tekken 3 and beyond, Eddy fought with a single purpose. That is to avenge his father's death. Justice for his family. And by Tekken 5, he got that revenge. The sheer quest that consumed him his entire life, from breaking out of prison cells to the King of Iron Fist, was actually complete. But Eddy felt empty. It seemed like Eddy Gordo might finally find peace. But Tekken wasn't done breaking his heart just yet. For anyone who thought Eddie's story ended with revenge, what came next is almost actually impossible to believe. He's Capoeira master, the old man who taught him everything in that prison cell. The man who gave him purpose when he had nothing. The man who transformed his grief into something so powerful and so beautiful, he fell ill, an incurable disease with no known treatment. And Eddie, who already given up his freedom, fortune, his youth for his dad, now faced the most impossible choice of his life. Now this gets interesting. The only person who's actually able to help was the head of Mishima Zaibatsu, and guess who that was? It was Jin, the grandson of the man that Eddie spent hunting. And guess what? Jin made him an offer he couldn't refuse. He goes, join Tekken Force, carry out your missions, do what we ask, and we'll find a cure for your master. Eddie knew exactly what Tekken Force was. He knew what he was agreeing to. And simply the love he had for his master, he said yes anyway. I guess some sacrifices you make not because they're right, but because love leaves you no other choice. For anyone who has given everything for someone they loved, it might be a girlfriend, family, whatever, right? A pet, and still lost them. Eddy Gordo's next chapter really does tell that story. So he carries out Jin's missions. He commits to every atrocious act that Jin asked for. But then his master dies anyway. So Eddie's carrying a lot of guilt. Everything Eddie had sacrificed, his freedom twice over, his principles. He initially sold his soul, and it didn't mean nothing because his master was gone. So Eddie was lost in despair and rage. Eddie abandoned the Tekken Force and stormed the G Corporation Millennium Tower alone. He fought through countless soldiers, reached the top, and came to face with Kazuya Mishima again, the man behind everything that had destroyed his life. But this time it was different because Kazuya nearly killed him. Eddy Gordo, who had survived prison, mastered capoeira, defeated enemies across multiple tournaments, sacrificed everything for the Grandmaster, was left for dead at the feet of the man he hated the most. Now, for anyone who thought Eddie's story ended in that tower, no, there's still one more chapter. Guess who finds him? Yoshimitsu finds him. This is hilarious. It's not that surprising because Yoshimitsu is a good guy. The mysterious swordsman who has always existed on the edges of the Tekken world. A warrior with his own code of honor. A bit like Robin Hood. He rescued Eddie from death. And through Yoshimitsu, Eddie was reunited with someone from his past. Lydia, the Polish Prime Minister. Childhood friend he hadn't seen in 10 years. And it was Lydia who said something that finally reached through Eddie's grief and rage and pain. She said to him, no matter what hardships people face, they can always rise again. That was the moment Eddie's story changed. Not the revenge, not the tournament victories. 7 simple words from someone who he remembered before all of this. Eddie put down his vengeance. He stopped fighting for revenge. And he started fighting to save people instead. And that's beautiful. Eddie turned spiritual towards the end. He said, you know what? I have to do God's work. From one of Tekken's most tragic stories came one of his most quietly beautiful redemptions, you could say. Now, we all grew up playing Tekken, and anyone who picked Eddie will make fun out of. But there's players like John Ding who really know how to use Eddie and mastered Eddie to the max. And Eddie, every time you look at him, you think this is a comic relief character. But top tier Eddie players really know how to use Eddie. And if you don't know how to play Tekken and you come across someone who's button bashing with Eddie, then you don't know what he's doing. Now, for me, Eddie is such a frustrating character if you fight him online, especially with lag. It's so difficult to deal with Eddie, especially with the relaxed stance. There's so many 50-50 mix-ups. But I'm more focused on his storyline. And his storyline is very deep. A 19-year-old boy who watched his dad die, spent 8 years in jail, sacrificed his principles to rescue his master. Still, he lost his master. Lydia's words saved him. That's not just a fighting game character. That's a story about what love costs, about what loyalty demands, about how people carry impossible pain and still find a reason to keep going. That's life. And Eddy Gordo, we salute you, brother. And at Aussie XP, we'll never stop saying so. Eddie's a character I never dislike. Even though people button bash with him, you understand, you know, he is what he is. Eddy as a character has flaws as well. He doesn't have any counters. His sidesteps were limited, though in Tekken 8, he pretty much has everything. Anyway, guys, this was a deep dive on Eddy. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. If you like the video, give it a like. If you want to see more of this, let me know. Subscribe to the channel. And now you can hype this video as well. So make sure you do that. Ozzy is out.